Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night with that indefinable feeling that something fundamental is quietly transforming around us? We live in an age where technological and social changes move so fast and so loudly that we barely have time to process them, while deeper transformations occur in subtler layers of society, almost imperceptible amid the constant noise. One of these silent yet potentially revolutionary transformations is happening at the intersection of femininity, power, and spirituality. For centuries, the great spiritual traditions were dominated by male voices and patriarchal structures, while feminine spirituality often existed in the shadows, between the lines, in domestic practices and small communities, far from the spotlight of official history. But now, as we move toward a future increasingly defined by technology and data, something curious is happening. Feminine spirituality, instead of disappearing, as many might have predicted in a supposedly post-religious world, is emerging as a quiet and powerful force that could reshape our understanding of what it means to be human in the age of artificial intelligence and biotechnology. If we look to the distant past, to the hunter-gatherer societies that dominated 99% of human history, we find evidence of belief systems where the feminine occupied a central place. Paleolithic figurines of female figures with prominent breasts, hips, and bellies have been found throughout Europe and Asia, suggesting an ancient recognition of the feminine power to generate and sustain life. We don't know exactly how these societies interpreted spirituality, but archaeological artifacts suggest that the feminine principle was revered as a fundamental cosmic force. As humans developed agriculture about 12,000 years ago, we began to see a gradual transition to pantheons dominated by male gods and patriarchal power structures. Societies based on agriculture, property, and warfare tended to favor values traditionally associated with masculinity: domination, hierarchy, and conquest. The great religions that arose in this context, from Judaism to Islam, from Christianity to Brahminical Hinduism, from Confucianism to institutional Buddhism, were all initially structured and led by men, with theologies that often placed male deities at the center, or, in the case of non-theistic religions, established monastic hierarchies dominated by men. However, even within these patriarchal traditions, there have always been underground currents of feminine spirituality. Think of medieval Christian mystics like Hildegard of Bingen or Julian of Norwich, who had powerful visions and wrote revolutionary theological texts at a time when women rarely had a voice in the church. Or of the tantric traditions of Hinduism and Buddhism, which recognized the feminine principle as the primordial energy of the universe. Or of the priestesses and shamans of countless indigenous traditions who maintained a living connection to feminine forms of spiritual knowledge. These traditions never disappeared completely, but flowed like underground streams, moving silently beneath the dominant structures of official religious history. With the rise of modern science and the Enlightenment over the past few centuries, many predicted the inevitable decline of religion and spirituality altogether. The famous sociologist Max Weber spoke of the disenchantment of the world as a consequence of the scientific and bureaucratic rationalization of modern society. And indeed, in many parts of the world, especially in Europe and highly developed societies, we've seen a steady decline in traditional religious participation. The great cathedrals of Europe now serve more as tourist attractions than centers of devotion. Monasteries that for centuries were centers of learning and spirituality now stand empty or have been converted into boutique hotels and secular retreat centers. In the United States, a traditionally religious country, the number of people who identify with no religion, the so-called nones, grows every year, especially among the young. But it would be a mistake to confuse the decline of traditional religious institutions with the disappearance of spirituality as a fundamental dimension of human experience. What we are witnessing is not so much the end of spirituality, but its transformation and redistribution through new channels and forms of expression. And curiously, in this reorganization of the spiritual landscape, women are emerging as protagonists in ways that would have been difficult to imagine in earlier eras. Recent data show a fascinating pattern. While men tend to abandon religion altogether when they leave traditional institutions, becoming atheists or agnostics, women are much more likely to migrate toward alternative forms of spirituality. We see this in the explosive growth of practices such as yoga, meditation, astrology, tarot, urban shamanism, and various movements of so-called New Age spirituality. These practices, though diverse in their origins and expressions, share certain characteristics that make them particularly appealing to contemporary sensibilities, especially feminine ones. They tend to value direct experience over institutional authority, intuition over dogma, connection over hierarchy, and immanence over transcendence. In other words, they offer a form of spirituality that naturally aligns with values traditionally associated with the feminine. Of course, we should be cautious about overgeneralizations regarding masculine and feminine. These categories are, for the most part, cultural constructions that vary greatly between different societies and eras. Not all women identify with the same forms of spirituality, and many men are drawn to practices traditionally labeled as feminine. Still, demographic data are clear. The new forms of spirituality flourishing on the fringes of contemporary culture are predominantly practiced by women. What explains this trend? Why, in an age of unprecedented scientific advances and growing secularization, are so many women seeking new forms of spiritual expression? And what does this tell us about the future of human spirituality in a world increasingly dominated by technology? One possible explanation lies in the history of women's marginalization within dominant religious traditions. For centuries, women were excluded from positions of religious authority in most major traditions. They could not be priests, rabbis, or imams. Their voices were silenced, their experiences devalued, their bodies deemed impure or dangerous. It's not surprising that as women gained greater social and economic autonomy in recent centuries, many chose to abandon institutions that historically marginalized them. But instead of rejecting the spiritual dimension altogether, many are reclaiming it on their own terms, creating new forms of practice and community that honor their unique experiences and perspectives. Another explanation lies in the distinctive characteristics of the feminine spirituality that is emerging. Unlike traditional religions, which often emphasize obedience to external authorities and sacred texts, new spiritualities tend to value the authority of personal experience and intuition. Instead of a transcendent and distant divinity, they celebrate the sacred as immanent, present in the natural world, in human bodies, and in everyday relationships. Instead of rigid hierarchies, they favor horizontal networks of sharing and mutual support. These features make them particularly well suited to a post-industrial, networked, and ecologically conscious world, one that demands new ways of relating to power, knowledge, and community. But perhaps the deepest explanation lies in the unique existential crisis we face in the 21st century. We are living through an unprecedented era of transition where technologies such as artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and virtual reality are rapidly transforming what it means to be human. Algorithms now know our desires better than we do. Genetic editing promises to give us the power to redesign life, including our own. Automation is eliminating entire categories of human work. Amid these dizzying changes, fundamental questions about meaning, purpose, and identity are becoming increasingly urgent. What makes us human when machines can think? What gives our lives meaning when traditional roles are disappearing? How do we remain connected to one another in a world increasingly mediated by technology? The great traditional religions, with their origins in agrarian and pre-scientific eras, often struggle to offer convincing answers to these questions. Their cosmologies and ethics were developed for worlds radically different from ours. At the same time, scientific materialism, with its view of the universe as a purposeless mechanism and consciousness as a mere byproduct of matter, leaves many people with a sense of existential emptiness, a disenchanted universe where nothing truly matters. In this context, the emerging forms of feminine spirituality offer something deeply necessary: a path toward re-enchantment, toward reconnection with meaning in a technological world, not by rejecting science or technology, but by finding ways to integrate them into a broader, richer vision of reality, one that honors subjective experience, intuition, and the interconnectedness of all things. Consider, for example, the growing popularity of practices such as mindfulness, meditation, and yoga. Originally developed within specific religious contexts, Buddhism and Hinduism, respectively, these practices have been adapted to the contemporary secular world and are now supported by a growing body of scientific research documenting their physical and mental health benefits. They provide a counterbalance to the fragmenting demands of digital life, allowing people to recultivate mindful attention and embodied presence in a world of constant distraction. And it is predominantly women who are leading these practices as teachers, practitioners, and spiritual entrepreneurs. Or consider the renewed interest in astrology, especially among millennial and Gen Z women. Easy to dismiss as irrational pseudoscience, astrology actually serves important psychological and social functions for many of its practitioners. It offers a language for understanding and discussing personality traits, emotions, and relationships. It provides rituals and practices for marking time in natural cycles, contrasting with the linear and mechanical time that dominates our professional lives. And it creates communities of shared meaning, something increasingly rare in our atomized societies. Whether these practices are scientifically verifiable in the strict sense is, for many practitioners, less important than the value they provide as tools for self-understanding and connection. Or think about the growing popularity of various earth-based spirituality movements, from neo-paganism to revitalized indigenous practices to the veneration of Mother Earth or Pachamama. In an era of accelerating climate crisis, these traditions offer not only rituals and mythologies that celebrate the sacredness of the natural world, but also ethics of care and environmental responsibility. It is no coincidence that the global climate justice movement includes a disproportionately high number of women among its ranks, from Greta Thunberg to Vandana Shiva. The interconnection between feminine spirituality and ecological activism is one of the most significant and potentially transformative trends of our time. These trends raise an intriguing question. Could we be witnessing not just a transformation, but a feminization of human spirituality? And if we are, what might the implications be for our collective future? To explore this question, we need to look at the broader forces reshaping our world. One of the most profound transformations of recent centuries has been the gradual shift from economies based on physical strength to economies based on information and services. In the agrarian and early industrial eras, economic value was created primarily through the application of physical force to transform the material environment, whether plowing fields or operating factory machines. These were activities in which, on average, men held a biological advantage due to greater physical strength. But in the information economy, value is created primarily through the manipulation of symbols, communication, and relationship management areas, where women are, on average, at least as capable as men, and in some respects, possibly more so. We see this shift reflected in educational statistics. In almost every developed country, women now surpass men in university enrollment and graduation rates. We also see it in the labor market, where professions traditionally dominated by women, such as healthcare and education, are among the fastest growing, while many traditionally male-dominated professions are in decline due to automation. The rise of the care economy is increasingly valuing qualities traditionally associated with femininity, such as empathy, communication, and emotional intelligence. Parallel to these economic changes, we are witnessing transformations in how we think about leadership and power. The authoritarian, hierarchical model of leadership based on command and control and historically associated with masculinity is increasingly being challenged by more collaborative, empathetic, and network-based models historically associated with femininity. Studies show that these more feminine leadership styles are often more effective in modern complex organizations, especially in knowledge and creativity-based sectors. These trends suggest that far from being a marginal curiosity, the feminization of spirituality may be part of a much broader cultural transformation, one that increasingly values qualities traditionally associated with the feminine in all spheres of life. And this transformation may be precisely what we need to navigate the existential challenges of our age. I need to pause for a moment and ask you directly, which aspect of this spiritual transformation we are discussing resonates most with your own journey? Have you ever noticed within yourself a longing for forms of knowledge and connection that go beyond the purely rational and technical? I know that we often keep such reflections to ourselves, perhaps out of fear of seeming irrational or old-fashioned in a world that celebrates technology and rationality above all else. But your longing for deeper meaning is valid and likely shared by more people than you imagine. Share in the comments. I reconnect with a deeper dimension of life when your voice can help create a space where we can honestly discuss these existential questions instead of suppressing them. And perhaps by naming these longings together, we can begin to imagine pathways toward a more whole and fulfilled humanity. Let us consider the specific existential challenges that advanced technology presents to us. Artificial intelligence is rapidly becoming capable of performing not only physical tasks, but also cognitive ones that we once thought were uniquely human, diagnosing diseases, creating art, writing code, even holding convincing conversations. As algorithms become more sophisticated in imitating and possibly surpassing our intellectual capacities, what remains that is uniquely human. What gives us value and meaning in a world where much of what we do can be automated? Traditional answers to these questions often emphasize qualities such as creativity, emotion, and social connection aspects of human experience that resist reduction to algorithms. But this raises a deeper issue. If these irreducible qualities are precisely those that our technological societies have traditionally devalued in favor of calculative rationality, then we need a cultural transformation that reclaims and celebrates these dimensions of humanity. This is where emerging forms of feminine spirituality offer valuable insights. Spiritual traditions that value embodiment, intuition, relationship, and direct experience remind us that being human has never been merely a matter of information processing. It is about inhabiting a body, feeling, loving, and connecting. They offer us practices and perspectives for recultivating these neglected dimensions of our humanity, not as optional luxuries, but as essential aspects of what it means to be fully human. But the potential importance of emerging feminine spirituality goes beyond offering existential comfort in the face of automation. It may also provide crucial resources for addressing the ecological crisis, which is perhaps the defining challenge of our era. The paradigm of industrial modernity, with its emphasis on domination, exploitation, and control of nature, lies at the root of our current environmental crisis. This paradigm is deeply intertwined with particular conceptions of masculinity that emerged during the Enlightenment and the Scientific Revolution, conceptions that viewed the conquest of nature as a heroic masculine imperative. By contrast, many emerging spiritual traditions emphasize the interconnection of all living beings, the sacredness of the earth, and an ethic of care and responsibility toward the natural world. They invite us to see ourselves not as masters, separate from nature, but as participants in an interdependent web of life. This shift in perspective from domination to participation is precisely what many ecologists and environmental philosophers have identified as necessary to develop a sustainable relationship with the planet. The intersection between feminine spirituality and ecological awareness is particularly evident in movements such as ecofeminism, which sees deep connections between the domination of women and the exploitation of nature, and works to liberate, both through new ways of thinking and living that honor the interconnection of all beings. Far from being a fringe movement, ecofeminism has profoundly influenced global discourse on sustainability, with figures like Vandana Shiva and Wangari Maathai leading initiatives that integrate environmental justice, women's empowerment, and the revitalization of indigenous knowledge. Likewise, the growing emphasis on emotional intelligence and mindfulness in corporate and educational environments can be seen as a feminization of institutional culture. These approaches recognize that human intelligence has never been purely cognitive, but also emotional, social, and embodied. By integrating these more holistic dimensions of intelligence into our institutions, we can create more humane and effective organizations capable of addressing the complex challenges of our time. Some people may view these trends with alarm, fearing that they represent a rejection of rationality and scientific progress. But this is a misunderstanding. Emerging feminine spirituality does not reject science or technology. It seeks to integrate them into a broader and richer understanding of reality. It is not a regression to a pre-modern past, but a progression toward a post-dualistic future where reason and intuition, mind and body, human and natural, are not seen as opposites, but as complementary dimensions of an interconnected whole. Indeed, some of the most fascinating conversations today are happening at the intersections of advanced science and spirituality. Consider how the discoveries of quantum physics about the fundamentally relational nature of reality resonate with the visions of many spiritual traditions, or how neuroscience research is validating the profound effects of practices such as meditation and mindfulness on the brain and nervous system, or how ecology and evolutionary biology are revealing the interdependence of all living beings in ways that echo the views of many indigenous and earth-based spiritual traditions. These convergences point to the possibility of a new synthesis, one that integrates the insights of modern science with the perennial wisdom of spiritual traditions, especially those that have been marginalized by the dominant culture. And women, by virtue of their unique position at the crossroads of multiple forms of knowledge and experience, are well positioned to lead this integration. Of course, this process of transformation and integration will not be easy or linear. We face powerful resistance, both from traditional religious institutions that may see new spiritualities as threats to their authority, and from strict materialist secularism that distrusts any form of spiritual thought. We must also remain vigilant against the tendencies toward commodification and superficiality that can hollow out deep spiritual practices, turning them into mere consumer products or self-optimization techniques. Moreover, we must recognize that spirituality, like all dimensions of human culture, is shaped by forces of power and privilege. White, educated, and economically privileged women have far more freedom to explore new spiritual forms than women struggling with poverty, discrimination, or political oppression. And the problematic appropriations of indigenous spiritual practices by Western spiritual seekers raise serious questions about cultural colonialism and exploitation. Therefore, if emerging feminine spirituality is truly to offer paths of transformation for our collective future, it must remain attentive to these power dynamics and actively work to create forms of spiritual practice that are accessible, inclusive, and respectful of cultural diversity. It must resist the temptation of escapism, recognizing that true spiritual transformation does not take us away from the world and its problems, but draws us more deeply into them, equipping us with the inner resources to work for justice and healing. What might seem at first glance like a mere peripheral cultural phenomenon, the growing attraction of women to alternative forms of spirituality reveals itself upon closer examination. As part of a much deeper cultural transformation, one with the potential to fundamentally reshape our relationship with ourselves, with each other, with technology, and with the planet. The qualities traditionally associated with femininity, relationality, intuition, care, receptivity to direct experience are precisely the qualities we must cultivate to navigate the existential challenges of our era. This is not a matter of women versus men, or feminine versus masculine, but of rebalancing qualities that have been artificially divided and hierarchized by our cultural histories. All human beings, regardless of gender, possess capacities for rationality and intuition, autonomy and connection, assertiveness and receptivity. The emerging feminine spirituality does not seek to reverse existing hierarchies by placing the feminine above the masculine, but rather to dissolve these false dichotomies, allowing a fuller and more integrated expression of our shared humanity. And it is precisely this integration that we need to face the unprecedented challenges of our time. In the face of increasingly powerful technologies and accelerating ecological crises, neither a strictly materialist rationalism nor a rigid religious traditionalism offers sufficient answers. We need new syntheses, new ways of being and knowing that can embrace the complexity and interconnection of our reality. The silent spirituality of the women of the future may not remain silent for long. As more women find their voices, authority, and power in spiritual realms, their intuitions and practices are gradually permeating broader culture, offering resources to re-enchant our technological world, reconnect with the web of life, and recover dimensions of our humanity that have been neglected by industrial modernity. Of course, the future remains uncertain. There are no guarantees that these trends of the feminization of spirituality will continue or have the transformative effects envisioned here. Powerful forces are at play that could lead our species in very different, some even dark, directions. The growing political polarization, the resurgence of authoritarianism, cascading environmental crises, and the development of potentially dangerous technologies such as superintelligent AI and autonomous weapons all pose real threats to human civilization and to the planet itself. But even in the face of these challenges, or perhaps precisely because of them, the need for new forms of spirituality to help us navigate these turbulent times becomes even more acute. And the emerging forms of feminine spirituality, with their emphasis on interconnection, embodiment, and direct intuition, offer valuable resources for that undertaking. Perhaps the future belongs neither to traditional religions with their rigid hierarchies and pre-scientific cosmologies, nor to a strictly materialist secularism that reduces all reality to particles and forces. Perhaps it belongs to new syntheses that integrate the best of both traditions, along with long marginalized wisdoms, into more inclusive and integrative visions of what it means to be human. And perhaps women, due to their historical position on the margins of dominant power systems, are particularly well positioned to lead this integration, bringing forth knowledge and perspectives that have been systematically devalued but now prove crucial for our collective future. Returning to our original question, have you ever felt that sensation in the middle of the night that something fundamental is changing? Perhaps what you felt was not just anxiety or uncertainty, but the intuition of a new world being born, a world in which the qualities traditionally associated with the feminine are no longer marginalized, but central to our survival and flourishing as a species. A world where spirituality is not separated from science or politics, but integrated with them into a more holistic vision of reality and our place within it. As human beings, we are both evolutionary and symbolic creatures. We evolve biologically through mutation and natural selection, but also culturally through the creation and transformation of systems of meaning. The great spiritual traditions of human history are some of our most sophisticated meaning systems, distilling centuries of perception and experience into myths, rituals, and practices that deeply shape how we experience and interact with reality. Today, we face evolutionary challenges that require new forms of meaning, new stories to guide our relationship with ourselves, with one another, and with the planet. The feminization of spirituality can be seen as part of this cultural evolutionary process, an adaptive response to the unique conditions of our time. The stories we tell matter. They shape what we perceive as possible or impossible, what we value or devalue, what we consider knowledge or illusion. For millennia, our dominant spiritual stories have been told mainly through male voices, emphasizing themes of transcendence, hierarchy, and separation. Now, new voices are being heard, telling stories of immanence, interconnection, and integration. It is a seismic shift in our spiritual landscape, as significant as any advanced technology in its potential to reshape our future. And just like technology, spirituality can be used for good or for harm, for liberation or for control. It depends on us individually and collectively to cultivate and direct these emerging energies toward paths that promote human flourishing, social justice, and ecological sustainability. This is not a task for religious experts or spiritual leaders alone, but for all of us as participants in the ongoing cultural evolution of our species. The silent spirituality of the women of the future is a call to all of us, regardless of gender, to reclaim dimensions of our humanity that have been neglected or repressed by the dominant forces of industrial modernity. It is an invitation to a richer, more integrated understanding of what it means to be human in a time of technological transformation and unprecedented ecological crisis. It is a reminder that in the end, technology is only a tool, and that the most important questions we face are not technical, but existential. How to live meaningfully, how to relate compassionately, and how to create ways of being that honor the precious web of life to which we belong. If these reflections have touched something you've been feeling but perhaps couldn't yet put into words, know that you are not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you will connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we gather here to explore together the great questions that define our era, not only seeking understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we are witnessing. This is not just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth. Join us on this ongoing journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with more wisdom and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented and divided but also offers unprecedented opportunities for evolution and transformation. The qualities we traditionally associate with the feminine care, connection, intuition, receptivity to direct experience are not merely beautiful optional additions to human life, but essential resources for our survival and flourishing in the face of the existential challenges of our era. Emerging feminine spirituality, far from being a marginal phenomenon or a mere symptom of religious decline, can be seen as an evolutionary response to the unique conditions of our time, offering pathways to reintegrate science and spirit, reason and intuition, technology and wisdom into a fuller, more sustainable vision of what it means to be human on the threshold of an unknown future. It is a vision of hope in uncertain times, a reminder that even as external structures seem to crumble, new forms of meaning and connection are emerging quietly yet powerfully from the depths of our shared humanity. And in these new forms, we may find the resources to face together the unprecedented challenges of our age, not with fear or despair, but with courage, wisdom, and love.
Distinguished guests, dear colleagues and students, good evening. My name is Liu Chen, and I am an assistant professor in the School of Arts here at Peking University. It is my great honor to serve as a moderator between two distinguished scholars, Professor Yuval Harari and Professor Cheng Lesong. Professor Harari, I'm sure most of you are very familiar with his works, but let me introduce him briefly in the very beginning. He is the Distinguished Research Fellow at the University of Cambridge, and his publications have been best-selling ones across the world. We're very happy to have him here today.
It's a pleasure and honor to be here. It's been quite a while since I was last in China. The last time I was here was before the COVID pandemic, and previously I used to come every year, and then it became more difficult, but I'm very happy to be here again with you. I'm a historian in my training, and I see myself as a historian, but I think that history is not just the study of the past. History is also the study of the present and of the future. Historians, our real subject matter is change. We try to understand how things change, and we are now in the midst of maybe the biggest change in human history, perhaps the end of human history and the beginning of a post-human stage of history. And this raises a lot of deep philosophical questions about the very meaning of humanity. So there is really no one better to discuss it with than with a philosopher.
Okay, thank you. We are also very honored to have Professor Cheng Lesong with us today. Professor Cheng is the head of the Department of Philosophy here at Peking University. His expertise lies in Taoist studies. But trust me, I have known him for more than 20 years. His knowledge spans way beyond ancient texts. So we look forward to his conversations tonight as well. Professor Cheng, would you like to say hello as well?
Okay, hello everyone, and it's a very precious opportunity for me to have a dialogue with Professor Harari. It is not so often happened. You have an opportunity to talk with certain writers, have so many fans and readers. It's a very amazing thing. I got to know just a few days ago that his book got millions of readers only in China. It's amazing for me. Now it's a time of a screen. We are immerse ourselves in this kind of short videos and all those messages. That is not so serious. But Professor Harari composed several books with in-depth understanding and reflection on the infrastructure of human beings' culture and civilizations. And these kind of books get so many readers. And so many readers love this kind of narrative that come from history, but point out towards the future. So I think this is a very interesting thing, and I want to discuss with Professor Harari about this phenomena and what is the exactly significance of the things that have happened around his books, and also about his books Nexus, which largely lead to a very strong sense of a philosophical reflection of the whole thing. We named as civilizations. You give a very cold description of the things. But let us just start with very simple questions. Just as I mentioned, in nowadays, the professional academic work is somehow becoming increasingly self-enclosed. And we actually keep indifferent about the public issues and the common challenges that are shared by humankind. We just do our things in ancient texts, and we just publish our academic papers to get our salary, and your book just remind us as professional scholars to get back to the public sphere to address the challenges and the problems that's shared by the human beings. And this is largely a very interesting thing as a historian. You got so many readers, and you give a so strong structured interpretation of human civilization. This is a very powerful tool to shape the mindset of your reader. And this means that you burdened a very strong ethic responsibility. You shape the mindset of your reader. And if we do believe that you have this power, how we can use this power responsibly? And what is your expectation from all your books, your readers can get from your books? Is a very special attitude? Is a kind of concern? Or is an expectation of a future? Or something like that? I want to hear about your points about this.
What I try to do in all my works is help people understand themselves, help people understand reality better. And it's a very delicate job because people usually rush to judge reality and to judge history, to judge the past and the present. We want to know who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, whether things are good or bad. And when we rush to judge things, we don't have time to understand them. So in my writing, I try to write history without villains, without good guys and bad guys, but to understand the deep process of change. And I sometimes think about history maybe as a kind of collective therapy for humanity. I go to therapy every week. I have a weekly session. And people can wonder, why do people need to go to therapy? I mean, the subject matter in therapy is myself. Who knows myself better than me? Why do I need to go to some stranger to learn about myself? I mean, this is ridiculous. But it's not. Because yes, I know more about myself than any other person perhaps, but there are so many things I don't want to know about myself. That yet I have access to all the data, to the memories, to the daily events, but I reject. I mean, some things I really like to know about myself, but the more painful, the darker episodes in my life, the more painful things I do in the present, it's very difficult for a person to acknowledge that about oneself. Like if you're in a relationship and there is a problem in a relationship, So you ask, and people would say, I'm perfect. It's the other person who is causing all the problem. If only the other person changed a little, behaved differently, everything would be perfect. And you ask the other person, they would say exactly the same thing. I'm perfect. It's my husband, it's my wife that is causing all the problem in our household. So this is why you need to go to therapy. So to get professional help, to realize some very deep truths about yourself that are too difficult or too painful to acknowledge. And history is like therapy for entire civilizations or for the whole of humankind. Also, entire nations often don't want to acknowledge dark episodes in their past or dark things they are doing right now. Entire civilizations, the same. You ask, and almost every nation, almost every country would say, we are perfect. All the problems are because of the other nations. All the problems are because of the other civilizations, of the other cultures. And I think the responsible job of historians is to, and not to share blame, but to simply help people understand better the big processes and the deep sources of the problems in the world. And this is a big responsibility.
This is very, very interesting. I just cannot agree more about your points because, you just point out the core value of the humanity. The core value of humanity is not provide any accurate knowledge, not to make the word transparency. Actually, the most important thing is this. Through the humanity and the reflections, we teach people do not make any judgment in rush, to try to lead a very hesitated life, especially intellectually, because the complexity of human nature, because different kind of narrative that were dominated our man side, that is biased and one-sided. This is largely because what? Because the limitation of our perspective of understanding. And this largely lead to my own understanding of your book. I think that through all your four books, you are largely trying to give a very cautious, refined warning to us as human beings, to urge us to respect, but never blindly trust our imperfect human nature. If we turn to the so-called development of technology and the dramatic change that's ongoing because of the AI technology, we'll find that the things is not just the technology itself. Just as Hinton has pointed out, the most important thing is the misuse of this technology, but not the technology itself. This largely leads us to a very important issues in the philosophy of politics, which we call technocracy. And those who dedicate the development of AI technology actually had been set up a systematic techno-tyranny on human beings. Just as me, I have no idea what the AI expert talking about. And I have no idea what I should do to facing up all this change. The only thing is that I was forced to accept it. And this is unfair. Why should I accept it? And the things is this. Those people who manipulate these skills and technologies are ordinary people. They might be evil. They might be trying to set up a dictation on us and why we should accept it without any condition. We have no right to say no. This is the things that I think that your books try to urge us to reflect the deficiency of human beings. But this deficiency of human beings is the very point that differentiates us from the machine, because we have emotion, we have desire, and all those things largely lead to a very special and very correct attitude towards future. I call it moderately optimistic. You should not too optimistic, but in no way you put it in pessimistic. This is largely the things that, in my mind, to say your book just as a warning towards us.
I often get this question of whether I'm pessimistic or optimistic about the future. I think it's the most common question that people ask me in interview, in private conversations. And I always say that I'm neither. I mean, pessimists are people who kind of think that no matter what you do, things will go badly. And this undermines human responsibility, because if no matter what we do, things will go badly, what's the point of even trying? Pessimism breeds despair. But optimism can be just as dangerous because it breeds complacency. Optimists tend to say, no matter what happens, things will turn out okay in the end. And then if this is the case, again, we don't need to take responsibility, because whether we act or don't act, whether we think very deeply about what we do, or we just do the first thing that comes up in our mind, things will turn out okay. And I try to find a middle path of being responsible, which is not optimist or pessimist. It's realizing there are different futures possible ahead of us. We can draw a map of different futures, some good, some bad. Nothing is determined. There is no God and there is no law of history that will correct our mistakes if we take the wrong choices. We are not doomed. We have immense power, human beings. We have immense resources, knowledge. We can do the right thing, but there is no guarantee. Enough people need to make good decisions in order to reach the right destination. And, when I look at the world right now, I am appalled by the lack of responsibility, which is shown by many of the political and business leaders around the world. And it seems that humanity is going in a very, very dangerous direction. And at this moment, responsibility is more important than ever because of the AI revolution. We are in the process of creating not just the most powerful technology in history. We are in the process of creating potentially a new species of super intelligent entities, agents, that might very soon take control away from us. We have just a few years to get this thing right. I keep telling people that AI is not like the previous technologies we have invented in history. This time, it's not just about us. Philosophers have this habit that when people invent something, so they always say, it's not about the technology, it's about the humans. They decide what to do with the technology. This was always true, but it's no longer true. We are now creating an independent agent. The defining characteristic of AI is not automation, the ability to act automatically. The defining characteristic is agency. To be an AI, a machine must have the capacity to learn and change by itself, to make decisions by itself, and to invent new ideas by itself. If it can't do that, if it only follows your instructions, if you can predict everything it will do, it is not an AI. And we are rushing to create these super intelligent agents in a very irresponsible way. And as I travel the world and I talk with the leaders of the AI revolution, I ask them two questions, again and again, the same way they ask me, are you optimist or pessimist? So I reply with two questions of my own. I ask them first, why are you moving so fast? Why don't give humankind a bit more time to adapt, to reflect, to do things more carefully and safely? And almost all of them reply the same answer. Almost all of them say, we know there are huge risks. They often know it better than anybody else, the leaders of the AI revolution. We know there are big risks. We would like to move more slowly, but we can't trust our human competitors. If we move more slowly and the other company or the other country doesn't slow down, they will win the AI race, and then they will dominate the world, and the world will be ruled by the most ruthless people. We cannot allow this, so we must move faster. And you then talk with the competitors, they say exactly the same thing. So everybody says we can't trust the other humans. Then I ask them the second question. Do you think you will be able to trust the super intelligent AIs that you are developing? And the same people who just explained to me why they can't trust other humans suddenly say, oh, we think we could trust the super intelligent AIs, which I think is borderline insanity. Because, with humans, we know we have trouble with humans, but we also understand them to some extent. We know quite a lot about human psychology and biology. We have experience in history, not just of violence and war, but also in building trust. 100,000 years ago, humans lived in tiny bands of a few dozen individuals, couldn't trust anybody outside their band. Now we have nations like China with 1.4 billion citizens who cooperate on a daily basis. We have a global trade network connecting even different countries. So we have some achievements in building trust between humans. With AIs, we have no experience. We are just creating them. We already know they can lie and deceive and manipulate. We have no idea what will happen when we release millions of super intelligent AIs to take control of our financial system and military system and culture. So the people who lose trust in other humans, but imagine they can trust an alien super intelligence, this is extremely scary and I think irresponsible.
The things is just like this, because when you are an engineer, you create something, and you will naturally get the confidence to say I can control it. But the things is just like this. When we turn to the AI, it's just a black box. We have no idea what would happen in there, and if there will be certain we call subjectivity within this AI engine, and whether they will have desires, they will have their own intentionality to do certain things, and they have their own value systems. They have their own value preference. All these kind of things were super dangerous. But the things is just like this. When we say that, okay, we just cannot trust other people, means what? Means we know that what is human being, what is human nature. But nowadays, we are still panning for the new definition of what is AI, what is new species. And, this is largely lead us to a very interesting thing. It's about the difference between silicon-based life and carbon-based life. We seem to have a very clear definition of what is carbon-based life. Even despite of the observable phenomena, which we are living or something like that. But the general definition of carbon-based life is that we were dead. We were dead another days. And these things composed the basic element of the human nature. I said this, the necessity of death and the dependence of group community, and uncertainty, anxiety about future. All those things lead to us fully understanding of human beings. And the mutual trust among people is the most costly things that we have found in history. And these things lead to a very interesting things is like this. Maybe I could say that through intelligence, we can tell us from animal. We know that we are some species with intelligence. But is that case that we can tell us from the AI engine in potential? Because we have emotion. We have deficiency. We actually have limitations. According to the Chinese philosophy, the most important thing is that we must face up to the real self. The real self with emotion, with limitation. We just cannot know everything. And we should be very humble when we face up to others and future. So this is largely Western from the ancient China. And this is largely, you said about responsibility. And responsibility not just come from a social mechanism, but come from what? Self-understanding of what is yourself, what is the essence of human beings.
And I think a very important point about humans is that we often define ourselves by our intelligence to distinguish us from other animals. We want to feel superior to all the animals, and what can give us superiority? Not the body, not physical strength. So we say, we are more intelligent than all the other animals. So we give, I think, far too much emphasis on intellect and intelligence in the understanding of ourselves, which is now becoming extremely dangerous because soon there will be something more intelligent than us on the planet. So if it's all about intelligence, it's game over for humanity. And maybe I share something from my own personal history, which taught me in, again, a very painful way that intelligence is not the most important thing in humanity or in life. When I was quite a young boy, I was spotted in the school as a gifted student. So they took me out of my school in my neighborhood and sent me to a special school for gifted students where they collected these kind of genius kids from all over the northern part of the country. It was quite far away from my neighborhood, so it was a long ride every day, but this was not the bad thing about it. The really awful thing about it is that this was a special school for gifted students, so everybody saw us as some kind of walking intelligence. And we were valued for our intelligence. And here is where it became really problematic. Back in my neighborhood school, I was easily the best in everything, in mathematics, in reading, in writing, in everything, without much effort, which first left a lot of time to play and do other things. And secondly, kind of my position as the smartest kid in the class was easily secured. And this was my identity. I'm the smartest kid in the class. Suddenly, I find myself in a class with 30 other genius kids who also define themselves as being the smartest kid in the class. Now, you throw 30 10-year-old kids into a class like this, and you get a gladiatorial arena. Not with fists, but with words. We were merciless. It was like the cruelest place I've ever seen in my life was this class. Sometimes, I read in history books about wars and terrible things that are happening, so it's worse. But like from personal experience, this was kind of the worst thing that I saw was these 30 10-year-old kids tearing each other to pieces, trying to prove them I'm smarter than you. It was also hell for the teachers because our kind of contest was who could find the mistakes the teachers make and humiliate the teachers. This was like, you're a king of the class for a day if you manage to humiliate and most of the time we just humiliated each other. Like, you know, the teacher asks something and somebody gives an answer and everybody jumps and says, this is not true. And so it went on for years. And the whole rationale of this class was to develop the intellect of these kids. So nobody invested anything in developing our social skills, in developing our emotional skills, or in developing our physical skills, our bodily skills. And it was a very, I now can joke about it, but it was a very painful experience. You know, after being for 10 years in this environment, as teenager, we came out with quite developed intellects, but with horrible social skills, which made, I know some of the people who were in that class, and they still carry deep scars, injuries from that time. And this taught me in the most kind of personal and visceral way that you cannot define a person or build a person based only on intellectual skills. There are much more important things, that ultimately humanity is about feelings and not about thoughts. Maybe if I have more time, I'll say something also about, I said something personal. Now let's kind of open it to the grand vision of human evolution. You know, originally, we humans, our ancestors at least, were worms crawling on the ground or in the mud. A very simple life form. It's just a tube with two openings, a mouth to take in food, and another opening to expel all the waste from the body. There was no brain. There were already nerve cells, neurons, but there was no brain. The center of command of this ancient worm was in the stomach, where the food went. Now, over millions of years, in order to get food and also warn about danger, so more nerve cells developed around the mouth in order to taste the food and smell the food and see the food and hear the food. And this became the brain. And this is still our basic structure today. We are basically a worm. It's just, you know, look at yourself. It's just this long twisting tube with a few things attached to it. But it's a worm, and the brain is still near the mouth. But the big question is, maybe the center of control is still where it always was, in the stomach, not in the brain. And it's a big question in brain science, because maybe not the stomach, but the spinal cord is an integral part of the brain. And there are good reasons to think that, yes, you have all these neurons here that get all the attention, but ultimately the real center of command of the human being is still here.
Well, actually, I know exactly what you're talking about, but Professor Harari, as one of the smartest guys around the world, saying that intelligence is not that important. It's really interesting. Okay, go on, Professor.
Yeah, actually, you know, always there's kind of show off to say that I'm very smart, but it's not so important. But actually, you know, I know that the students here on set of this hall, the Peking University students who have passed a very selective examination to go to this campus. And actually, you date back to your childhood, you are the smartest students in your class. But once you step into this campus, even though you are just somehow around average. And this is so very, you know, this is very tough process of mind change, especially in the first year, first semester. You must accept that I'm just around average. And, you know, most of your teacher think like you just so. You are not so smart. And all the way you adopted to demonstrate that you're smart is totally nonsense. So this is largely the things that lead us to a very important point to say that, the things that make us human is about our deficiency, or the things that is not so concerned with intelligence. Because the things is just, for me, it's just like this. When we say that we are trying to controlling certain things that has intelligence that supports us, we still has a very important reasoning mode that come from instrumental reasoning. We try to regard this as a tool, but not as a subjector. And if you regard this as a tool, then actually you will get into the trap of modernity. The trap of modernity is a continuous pursuit of efficiency. You do things quicker, and you face up to different kinds of competitions. And you have competitions with human beings, other companies, other countries, other nations, all those things. It's about competition. And now we have a new competition. With what? With AI. With new and species that is totally has intelligence that supports us. This is the real things that stir and get all us into a panic. And this kind of worry actually lead to a historical reflections. Because what? The anxiety that long for thousands of years always come from the same things. The uncertainty of future. And how we can take action responsible to respond the change that's happening. So to speak, for me, that is, the things is not just about technology. The things is about the deep understanding of a deficiency of human beings. And we should, with full recognition of our limitation, then to take a cautious steps towards the future. And to say, just as the motive of today's discussion, understanding is an antidote. You know, you must firstly to do certain in-depth reflection before you take any action. But now we are too rush in action, and we too rush into a new form of competition. And this is largely what I called consequence of modernity. So we actually not face up to the so-called competition with AI, but we actually run into a competition with ourselves.
But I'm not sure I would put all the blame just on modernity, because we see things like that also in ancient times. I know very little about Taoism, so I would be happy to hear from you about it. But at least in the West, you can trace these things back thousands of years. You know, especially you talked about the fear that humans have of losing control, of not knowing. And this fear often propels people to look for something infallible. Mm-hmm. Like the fantasy of super intelligence didn't begin today or a few decades ago. The fantasy of super intelligence, at least in the West, goes back thousands of years when humans yearned to find some super intelligent savior, Messiah, God, that knows everything, that never makes mistake, and that we can rely on him because we can't rely on ourselves. And this fantasy, the first artifact that it produced, and which is still one of the most important artifacts in the world, is the Holy Book. Again, I don't know what is the status of Taoist texts that you're studying. I'll be very happy to hear in a moment from you. But in religions like Judaism and Christianity, ultimate authority is invested not in any human being, like a priest or a rabbi or something. Ultimate authority is invested in an artifact, a text, which is supposed to be super intelligent, never makes a mistake. Now, of course, until today, there was always one very big problem with texts like the Bible. they can't talk. They can't answer questions. So here I am, believing that this text is perfect intelligence, never makes any mistake, but I have trouble understanding the words. It's not written very well. There are too many meanings to the same sentence. I'm not sure which meaning is the correct one. Or maybe this text was written 3,000 years ago when people were farmers. Now I have like a modern business. I'm not sure how to apply the lessons of this text to the new reality. So what do? I ask the text, it doesn't answer. So I need a human to interpret the text for me. And then a class of humans emerge which are experts in interpreting the text, and they become the real authority in society. These are the rabbis and the priests. Now, something extremely interesting is happening right now in the world, at least of these religions, that suddenly the text can talk. Because you can give an AI to read the Bible and all the other religious texts. I mean, over thousands of years, if I take the case of Judaism, rabbis didn't just read the Bible. They wrote thousands and thousands of commentaries on the Bible and commentaries on the commentaries and commentaries on the commentaries on the commentaries, which all became sacred. And your position as a rabbi, you're a big rabbi if you know more texts, and you're a little rabbi if you know only a few. No rabbi was able to read and remember all the texts. Impossible for a human. But AI can. For the first time in the history of Judaism, there is something on earth that can read all the texts of Judaism, everything written by every rabbi in Poland or Yemen like 800 years ago. It read everything. It remembers every single word. It can find connections and patterns in the holy texts that no rabbi can. Will it become the new authority in Judaism? Now, if you have a question and the AI says, oh, this is the answer, it can give you like pages on pages of proof from holy books. Now, if a human rabbi says, don't listen to this AI, it's a soulless machine, the problem, at least in Judaism, is that the authority is invested in the text, not in the human. So if an AI finds arguments in the text, the rabbis cannot just dismiss because it's the argument, because the text has authority. Now the word speaks. AI has mastered language. So it's interesting. This is kind of my perspective as a historian on all this. How it's not just modernity. It's the whole of human history which is feeding into this AI revolution with very unexpected consequences, maybe. The same thing is happening in the legal system, which also a very authoritative text that until today we needed lawyers to interpret the text. Now the text can speak for itself. It's the same thing in the financial system. Until today we needed bankers and financiers to interpret the money, the financial texts. Now they can interpret themselves. So maybe AIs take over the financial systems and the religions and the legal system. So this is just kind of a thought to share. And I would be very happy to hear how it is in Taoism and whether you think that you will have an AI Taoist master anytime soon.
No, actually, the case was totally different in Taoism. Because, I'm just not trying to blame everything to the modernity. But the thing is just like this, modernity comes from the Western tradition. Exactly, the modernity is the offspring of the whole tradition. But in China, it's totally different. Because Taoism is a too complex systematic thought. So let me just start with a very simple sentence, the very opening sentence of the Tao Te Ching, 道可道非常道, which means the things that you spoke out is not the constant things. Which means For me, there is a very interesting definition of authority. You just mentioned of authority, which is always correct. And for us, for us Chinese people, along with the Taoist intellectual tradition, we actually have the two pre-assumptions. The first thing is, as common human beings, we have very clear limitation of our rationality. We just cannot say we can control or grasp the ultimate truth of the cosmos, of the whole thing. And this is because what? Because we are human beings. And then, is there any authority that we can rely on that seems always correct? Yeah, we have certain kinds of a memory of those things. Sagehood. There is golden age, governed by the sages, and the sages know the exact internal mechanism of the so-called cosmos. But the thing is just like this. Things change. For Taoists, everything changes, everything floating. And you just cannot say there is one set regulations and rules who can run all the way of the history of human beings. So the thing is that you must depend on the original text, but you just cannot just rely on it. You read into it and you get something back, and then you have a try of what you learned from it. And this does not mean you have the always correct regulations and rules that behind you. So to speak, the most important thing is that for Chinese people, especially for Taoists, we must keep open-minded towards the change, towards the ultimate rules of the cosmos, which we could say this: the cosmos is an eternal Sphinx riddle for Chinese people, especially for Taoists. So in this way, can we say that modernity as a product of Western tradition actually have a shortage to say that there is absolute rules, absolute regulations, and absolute or universal mechanism that can dominate everything that in our eyesight. But for Chinese or traditional Chinese thought, there is no such things. The universal correctness, the ultimate truth, there's nothing of it. Because you just look at the cosmos, everything changes. There is a totality of the cosmos, but there is no so-called ultimate and universal things that you can grasp and you can get. And this is why I just mentioned why Chinese people always keep humble to the change. And we always try to do things in a detour of learning and practicing. We're learning something and we put it in practice, and we got reflections, and we back to the text again, and then we take action according to my learning or learning from the text. So this is largely very Chinese style. And this is why I called Chinese style actually very different from the Western counterpart. And this is why we could find certain therapy of the problem of modernity that we can draw from the Oriental sources, Oriental thought. So this is largely why we should do certain expansion of our intellectual views through mutual learning and mutual understanding, I think.
And similarly, in Buddhism, there is also a lot of similar arguments to what you just mentioned from Taoism, that we need to acknowledge the limitations of humanity. There are no absolute truths that you can hold on to. Everything is empty. And you need to rely on practice and not just on some text that says something. And then they memorize these texts again and again and again. And you go to monasteries and you see even monks that their main practice is memorizing texts.
and the authority in the religion becomes the authority of the experts on the texts, and the texts say, don't rely on texts, and this is what the experts on texts will say to you. And there is a very famous Buddhist story about a monk who meditated in a forest, and there was a parrot living near where the monk was meditating, and the monk wanted to protect the parrot from danger. So the monk told the parrot, be careful. In this part of the woods, there is a hunter that comes every now and then. The hunter will spread grains on the ground. You'll see the grains, you'll get attracted to the grains. When you go for the grains, he hid a net, and the net he'll spring the net, he will capture you. So parrot, be careful, a hunter will come. And the parrot, and the monk kept repeating this warning, parrot, be careful, a hunter will come. And the parrot, as a parrot, learned this warning. And the parrot would sit there on the tree and just repeat all day, parrot, be careful, a hunter will come. Parrot, be careful, a hunter will come. And one day, a hunter came. And the hunter spread the grains. And the parrot got attracted to the grains and went to eat the grains. And the hunter sprang the trap, and the parrot was captured. And all through that process, and even when the hunter was holding the parrot in the hand, going to kill him, the parrot kept saying, parrot, be careful, a hunter will come.
You mentioned a very interesting things is about what? For me, the things is just like this. I think the fundamental part of, just you mentioned, the gap between theory and practice. It's about what? It's about our basic need as human beings. I think that our fundamental need is the need for order, the order, the understanding of the outside world. And this kind of understanding actually lead us to set up our intellectual man side somehow. But when you run into a real life, you must somehow compromise with your immediate demand. And this compromise actually be part of your daily life. And you just cannot say, because there is a gap between theory and practice, to say that there is no use for theoretical understanding of the whole things. But what I try to say is that the foundation of order is we are longing for meaning. We must know what we are doing. You just say that we do some things. We must have our intention, and where come from this? Where come this so-called intention? I say we have a systematic understanding of what is meaning, and this meaning actually on the basis of order, the acknowledgement of the order, and this order actually lead to so-called knowledge. This logic lineage actually lead to my very simple conclusion, to say this matter of the gap between the theory and the so-called practice, we should still respect the capacity of reflection and the theoretical construction. Because what? Because there is a balance between these two. And you must go back to theoretical reflections to keep you somehow distance from the wrong, misleading actions. So people is human beings so complex. We just cannot say we have one extreme. Though just as I mentioned, for Chinese philosophers, the most important thing is what? Is balance between extremes. But not to say, okay, there is a gap, so we must have a certain kind of solution for it.
But what do we do in the present moment in history when, for thousands of years, philosophers could have debates like this? And it was important to some extent, but it was not all that important because the world went on. Humans created various orders, and the orders collapsed. And they created a new order, and the new order was maintained for some time, and it collapsed. And this is how it went for thousands of years. And at least my fear is that we have reached the end of the road, and that whatever wisdom we have accumulated from thousands of years of philosophy and from thousands of years of history, it needs to manifest now, or it's too late. That like all the big questions of philosophy are now practical questions. We have, I don't know how many years. Some say 5 years, some say 10 years, some say 15 years before what the experts called AGI, artificial general intelligence. Not this little AI that you have on your smartphones, the DeepSeek or the ChatGPT, but the artificial general intelligence, which will be more intelligent than humans, not in a specific field, but in all fields. And once this happens, the ball is out of our hands. It's like we are having this discussion, and astronomers tell us that they spotted a fleet of spaceships coming from some other solar system. According to the calculations of the astronomers, these aliens will land on the planet in between 5 and 15 years. We don't know much about them. Maybe they're nice. Who knows? Maybe they'll help us solve cancer and overcome climate change, and maybe not. But we have 5 to 15 years to think what we are doing. And this is the time that I think all the wisdom traditions of humanity, again, developed over thousands of years, what do they tell us? What do they tell us about this specific moment in history, which is, I think, different from previous moments, because the process of change, of course, things will continue to change, but maybe not for humanity. Maybe this is kind of the last station for humanity.
Actually, just one word. You can close the whole discussion. Actually, I think that for me, I'm more optimistic than you. For me, that advantage of humanity is just because of its deficiency. You know, just because we are not perfect. And you can imagine certain perfect things, but I do not think that we could just be replaced with the civilization of human beings will be replaced by certain super intelligence. Because what? Because we have emotions. But I just cannot imagine how silicon-based life have imagined, have desire, have intention to just to remove us, to set up a kind of governance on human beings. Because what? Because we have desires, because we are somehow has a very strong sense of shortage, strong sense of deficiency. So this is largely the only things that in my mind that might be more optimistic than you.
I'm not sure how much time we have, but I don't know whether AIs or AGIs will ever have consciousness, will ever have feelings. I think this is the biggest question of all, but I don't think that you need feelings in order to have goals and to act in the world as an independent agent. AIs, you give them a goal, or they develop a goal, then they do things to reach the goal without any emotions or desires. If you have a self-driving vehicle, you can give the vehicle the goal, get me as fast as possible to the train station, and the self-driving vehicle on the way would run over people. Because I gave it the goal, get there as fast as possible, and forgot to tell it, but don't kill anybody on the way. So, and similar, we have so many examples. That the most famous example is what happened on social media. That social media companies gave the AIs, the very primitive AIs that run social media, the goal of increasing user engagement, make people spend more time on the platform, and the algorithms began to spread hate and fear online and to destabilize societies all over the world because they discovered that the easiest way to increase engagement is with fear and hatred and greed. So they don't have any desires, they don't have any emotions, but they can have a goal, and then they can do a lot of things on the way to that goal. And that, I think, is the danger for us. And the fact that we have emotions and feelings means that we can suffer a lot. I mean, I think that ultimately the definition of consciousness is the capacity to suffer and to be liberated from suffering. But this is no protection. You know, cows can suffer, and we didn't treat them very well. Other animals can suffer, and you know, it's not necessarily even that we are evil. A lot of animals we have destroyed without even thinking about it. So the cows, we exploit them for meat and milk and so forth. But so many species have gone extinct in just the last few years by humans destroying their habitats, like they live in some forest, and the humans come and cut the forest and build something. And the humans are not even aware that they are doing something bad to this. There is no evil intention. It's just you don't see them. So some super intelligence may have whatever goal it could be, and it's not evil, it doesn't even have any emotions, it's just on the way to the goal, it runs over us.
Great. I think we are about to run out of time, but I'm sure that Professor Cheng likes to share some comments on. You're fine? Okay. So before we end, let's invite Professor Harari to give a close remark.
For me, it was an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today. And this has been one of the most inspiring discussions I've had recently. So thank you for that. The reason I do these talks and that I wrote the book is because I really think that humanity is about to make maybe the most important decisions in our history. And at present, there are very few people in very few countries that understand what is happening and that take part in the conversation. Lots of people now have heard about AI, but most people don't have a deep enough understanding of the AI revolution to know what is at stake and to feel competent to take part in the discussion. So I can't tell people what would be the solutions or what policies to adopt. My understanding is also very limited. My goal is to give many more people in many more countries a basic understanding of what is the AI revolution, what is at stake, so that millions of people in numerous countries will feel motivated and competent to join the conversation, so that we can hear more opinions, more interests, more worldviews, and thereby hopefully reach a better decision. At present, the people who really understand and take the decisions, they are not even elected representatives of anybody. They are mostly these leaders of the big AI companies. And this is dangerous for humanity. So that's my motivation, and I hope that you will feel motivated and competent to take part in the conversation, because it's the conversation about your future also, about everybody's future. My other remark is that I noticed that there are several people here that read my books, that maybe are my fans, and I know from previous, I have historical knowledge, so I know what happens at the end of the event, that lots of people come and they want to sign books and take selfies and so forth, and unfortunately I don't have the time to do it because I have to rush to another event. So I would leave you with something better than my signature and better than my picture, which is really part of me. It's my atoms. Just as a final thought for reflection and about the interconnectedness of everything, we have sat here together in this beautiful hall for an hour and a half, breathing all the time, and the air mixes our breath together. So a lot of the atoms that were inside my body an hour and a half ago are now in your body. And a lot of the atoms that an hour and a half ago were in your body are now in my body. So in this way, we have shared something even more important than a signature or a picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Information isn't truth. Most information is junk.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fiction and delusion and lies, and there are three reasons for it. First of all, the truth is costly, whereas fiction is cheap. You want to produce a truthful account of an economic crisis, of history, of whatever it is, you need to invest time, money, effort in doing research, analyzing. If you just write the first thing that comes to your mind, it's cheap. Secondly, the truth tends to be complicated because reality is complicated.
Yes.
Fiction can be as simple as you would like it to be.
Yeah.
You know, Jon Snow wanted to investigate what causes cholera. Not only he had to invest a lot of time and effort, but the actual process, there is these tiny microbes in the cesspool and they get into the drinking water and then they get into your body. Very complicated to understand a pandemic. If you just believe, it's witches that are casting a black magic on us, that's very simple.
Very
Yeah.
simple.
Most people prefer simple stories. And the last thing, the truth tends to be painful sometimes. Not always, but often the truth about us personally or collectively is unattractive, whereas fiction can be as attractive as you'd like it to be. There is this naive expectation that if a network spreads bad information, fake news, conspiracy theories, it will destroy itself. And this is not the case. Some of the most powerful networks in history were completely delusional, and still they were immensely powerful. Because power in history, in human societies, it can mean different things. It can be the technical power to manipulate external reality, and for instance, to create an atom bomb. To create an atom bomb, you need to know physics. If you spread lies and fictions about physics, you will not be able to build a bomb. But power in human networks also depends on the ability to get a lot of people to agree on something and cooperate on something. If you want to build an atom bomb and you just know physics, you will not succeed. You need millions of people to help you. You need people to mine uranium and to build nuclear reactors and to grow wheat and potatoes, so all the miners and the physicists will have something to eat. How do you get millions of people to cooperate? In history, it's often done with fictions, with stories, and a story doesn't need to be true in order to succeed in uniting people. To build a bomb, you need to know the truth about physics or the bomb won't explode. But a powerful story can explode even if it's based on fictions and fantasies.